Imagine a typical 1970s American success story. A handsome, polite psychology student, someone articulate enough to study law, and engaged enough to spend his weekends volunteering for local political campaigns. That respectable, charming facade belonged to Ted Bundy. He used it to mask a brutal reality, eventually murdering at least 30 young women across the United States. The terror started in 1974, largely in the Pacific Northwest. The targets were almost exclusively young, college-aged women, students walking to their cars, studying in the library, or socializing on campus. We expect predators to look dangerous. Bundy weaponized that assumption. He looked like someone you could trust, and that made him nearly invisible. His method relied heavily on this manufactured harmlessness. He would often feign an injury, wearing a cast or using crutches, and ask young women for help carrying books to his car. He introduced himself as Ted. But his ability to operate undetected relied on a major structural flaw in 1970s policing. Law enforcement was highly localized. Police departments rarely communicated across county lines, much less state lines, and there was no centralized system for missing persons. This map shows the scope of the problem. Investigators in Washington, Oregon, and Utah were independently staring at dozens of missing persons reports. Because the files sat in isolated cabinets, no one realized they were tracking the exact same person. The fragmented architecture of American law enforcement provided the perfect cover. The system was siloed, and he slipped right through the cracks. Eventually, the volume of disappearances forced a change. Detectives began crossing borders to compare notes, sharing files previously locked in separate jurisdictions. As the data merged, a unified profile emerged. Multiple witnesses consistently described a man named Ted, who drove a light-colored Volkswagen Beetle. In August 1975, a patrol officer stopped Bundy's car during a routine traffic stop in Utah. Inside the vehicle, investigators discovered several suspicious tools, including a metal crowbar, a pair of handcuffs, and a ski mask. Detectives used this opening to slowly build their case. They compiled photo lineups and interviewed surviving witnesses from across state lines, piecing together circumstantial evidence. Centralizing data was the only way to penetrate his disguise. Connecting those isolated police reports turned a ghost into a tangible suspect. Identifying a killer and keeping him contained are two different problems. Even after his arrest, the system failed again. Bundy managed to escape from physical custody twice. His second escape triggered a massive nationwide manhunt. He fled clear across the country to Florida, completely dropping off the radar. The violence escalated in January 1978. Bundy broke into a university sorority house in Tallahassee, brutally attacking multiple young women in a single night. Weeks later, a police officer spotted a stolen vehicle. Following a physical struggle to avoid arrest, Bundy was finally captured for good. Local warrants were useless against a highly mobile predator. The delay in tracking his movements exposed a lethal gap in law enforcement, highlighting the urgent need for a rapid response national alert system. The trial became a bizarre media spectacle. Millions watched as Bundy, acting as his own attorney, confidently paced the floor, attempting to charm the jury. Prosecutors knew that witness testimony alone might not overcome his performance. They needed concrete, irrefutable proof. They turned instead to physical evidence, introducing a forensic technique that was highly novel at the time: dental bite mark analysis. The unique impressions left at the sorority house crime scene perfectly matched Bundy's teeth, definitively tying him to the Florida murders. Objective forensic science shut down his psychological games. The physical evidence convinced the jury, resulting in multiple murder convictions and a death sentence. For over a decade, Bundy denied everything. It was only shortly before his execution that he finally confessed to 30 murders. Investigators and experts suspect the actual death toll is much higher. The failures of the 1970s forced law enforcement to adapt. Mandated interstate cooperation and centralized data sharing became standard operating procedure. The complexities of tracking a killer who appeared so outwardly normal pushed behavioral profiling into the national spotlight. Agencies like the FBI expanded their use of psychological analysis to hunt down predators based on behavioral patterns rather than just physical clues. The damage he inflicted revealed glaring vulnerabilities in the system. Closing those gaps modernized American criminal investigations. We don't study this case to admire police tactics. We remember it for the dozens of futures that were violently stolen, and the families who have to carry that loss forever. It also highlights the relentless dedication of the detectives and surviving witnesses who worked tirelessly to piece together a fragmented puzzle and stop the violence. Ultimately, the case shatters our safest assumptions. Evil doesn't always hide in the shadows or announce itself with a menacing scowl. Sometimes it looks perfectly normal, and it smiles.